thank you for joining us for the platform, the pinnacle of all discussions on Flow 94.9 FM. I am Wisdom Thomas. The current administration in the state and nationally may be only 2 years old, with more than 1 year to the next election cycle. Yet, the state, including the nation, is experiencing a massive shake-up politically, with alignments, realignments, defection, internal wranglings almost becoming the order of the day. Not least when most of them are discussing the prospect of winning the 2027 election. But then, how have the current administration of Dr. Alex Otti'S in the state, Abia, which came in riding on the back of a massive desire for change, fared in terms of policies geared towards repositioning the economy, especially how this all translates to a better life for Abians? I have my guest here in the studio to help us gain insight into what we are discussing on the platform this morning. I'm talking about Dr. Reuben Brand, the executive chairman of the 16th Council, a think tank based in the U.S. Good morning to you, sir. It's a pleasure to have you join the conversation.
Thank you for having me. The 16th Council is based in the UK.
Okay, UK. Thank you for that correction. Let's get started by beginning from the overall, in looking at the periphery of the state across the board. I don't know if you perceive any change, especially looking at the fact that we now have a different government which came in via a different party altogether from the PDP. Do you sense change across the length and breadth of Abia State?
First of all, thank you for having me. And I think there is a first change, that there is a new government, which came through a new party. So, there is a first change. And clearly, to be fair to His Excellency Dr. Alex Otti'S, there have been quite a number of improvements from what it used to be in Abia State. I mean, in Umuahia, where I have been for over the past couple of days, I've seen the roads being done. I've seen the Osa Road, and I've seen some of those efforts that are ongoing. I'm also aware that there are a lot of things happening in Aba as well. So clearly there is an improvement. There's a difference, and to be fair to the government, there have been changes really.
But because we're going to go down to specifics and look at how all of that translates to a better life to the Abia. And I mean, upon assumption of office, there is this upsurge, if I would have to call it that way, in terms of the federal allocation coming from the federal government. And you could think that is tantamount to the fact that the fuel subsidy was removed. And so it took that massive dive upwards, and then that we've not seen before in the state. I mean, the highest allocation that has come to the state happened in July 2024, which is around 17 billion naira. Looking at that and what you see around the state, does it correlate? Is there that level of impact?
Yeah, so the state is gaining, receiving much more in terms of allocation right now. And what I would say is that, the objective, what the focus, what the goal of the government should be, is to make the state competitive.
Okay.
You see, when a state is competitive, then there will be increase in productivity. When there is increase in productivity, you will see you see people earning more. You see money circulating, and living standard will therefore improve. All right. So I should think that the efforts being made in terms of infrastructure, it's good. I do not, however, think that it is sufficient. I mean, considering that much more funds come in right now, we would expect that a solid foundation is laid in terms of infrastructure, and the government is almost 2 years, actually just almost 2 years. This is April already. So I would think that there is more that can be done. I know.
Is that to say that there is disparity? You don't think it's at par when you look at the infrastructure on ground and the level of funds coming in as well?
You know, interestingly, it appears to many of us, by the way, that governments have a responsibility of receiving and managing federal allocation. Again, that is even very problematic. And when federal allocation is insufficient, we borrow. It's a horrible idea. So I think that there was a lot of faith and hope in the government of LSOT, and a lot of people looked forward to him becoming, especially coming from the private sector. He was a banker, he's an economist, he's well exposed. So there's a very high expectation from people like me, right? Because I'm going to look beyond a 3-lane road. I'm going to look beyond potholes that have been done. I'm going to look beyond 300 people being sent to go and learn mechanized agriculture. I'm going to look beyond all of that and think in terms of how this is translating to a solid base for improving Abia's competitiveness. I'm going to look beyond setting up a global advisory council, all right? I'm going to also look beyond setting up a committee to manage ease of doing business, even though I'm aware that that has translated to some gains. Abia has moved up a little bit in the competitiveness scale in Nigeria, but much still needs to be done. Now, if you understand what I'm saying is that even beyond the 17 billion you talked about, right, that the effort of the government has to translate to much more, because I mean in 2026, basically towards the end of 2026, or even towards the middle of 2026, much of the focus will be on re-election and not governance. So we might be seeing the peak of what the government can do, right? So I think there needs to be more effort by the government.
Let me pick up from the point when you mentioned ease of doing business, and rightly so. He did set up a committee that was in July 2024 for ease of doing business, and yes. I don't know how you think that has translated to some level of success. Significantly, you did mention that there seemed to be that upward trajectory, because Abia State moved up to 21st in the state ranking in Nigeria, that 2024, with that charge by the Abia State Governor, Dr. Alex Oti, to the team led by his Deputy Governor, Ikechukwu Emetu, to move to 10th. But
very good.
Do you think they have made some level of progress? I know that the issue of Ministry of Lands, registration of businesses are some areas they've made inroads to, but are they significant? Are they, good enough for where we are at the moment?
We thank the governor, but I will ask for more. I'm not going to be satisfied with what has happened so far. Yeah, the target to move to 10 is very interesting. That's very good. But whether or not that happens is going to be a totally different issue. And we need to see, for example, council and the committees are doing, I'm not sure there's much of it in the public domain, because I had to search really myself. Yes, I saw the information about moving to position number 20, and that's very good. And the desire to move to number 10. Okay, but it is one thing to have a wish or a vision. Is another thing to realize that. So to realize that, there needs to be a clear strategy. And for me, some of these things, what the government should be doing is declaring emergencies on some of them. Let's talk about food security, for example. I would have ordinarily thought that the government would declare emergency on food security, on agriculture, and there would have been a massive intervention from the day one in office in that sector. And I'm not just talking about making yam, producing yam and then looking for how to export it to wherever. I'm talking about building a clear cluster where we not only get these things done, but we are actually able to refine them so they become complex products that innovation and creativity has gone in, so that the market value can actually increase. So, and I think that if this had been done from day one, by now we should have been seeing results. you see. So I know about the people who are sent to train on agriculture, mechanized agriculture, and I'm aware that perhaps there have been some funds being disbursed to them, something like that. It's not very clear to me, to some of them. But I'm saying that these things are not enough. They are not sufficient. We should have been declaring emergency in those sectors. Talk about energy, even you haven't mentioned it, which is a very key in improving the business environment. Cost of energy is pretty high, and I know somebody will say, you can't blame the governor for that, and I'm not even blaming the governor for anything. I'm only hoping that more can be done. I have a lot of faith in his government to make that, to just help you buttress that point. I came down to Abia State to vote during the election. That's how much faith we had in the government, and some of us are pretty well exposed to know what government looks like in other places, you see. And I know that people of our state have been through a really long period where there needs to be a very serious government neglect. So with the little that we've seen, it looks like, there has been nothing like it, right? But we need to do more. And you see, there is a lot of faith on the Otti'S government. You notice also that Abia is ranking third in terms of foreign investment coming in after Lagos and Abuja. Those are indicators of faith in what his government is doing. And I think that is something that is a strong foundation that can be built on. When confidence is laid on you that way, it means you can actually leverage it to do much more. And we also need a lot of transparency, and sincerity, so we can trust our government the more. I am aware of the project Ekweme that has to do with renovation of primary health centers, about 200 of them. And I'm also aware of the controversy now about that, with some claiming that is a World Bank project, which the state government has labeled theirs, and there seem to be very strong evidences about that. So again, there needs to be a transparency, because you want to build a competitive environment. The people should be able to trust the government. There has to be it has to be a government built on values. Now, the government has dismissed that, but there are evidences that show that this might not be an ordinary smoke, right? So what I'm saying is that we have a lot of hope in the government, and we want to see more.
Let's talk about incentives to small businesses. And I know that sometime last year, should be around July, the government disbursed something to the tune of 1 billion naira to nano micro business operators across 184 electoral wards in Abia State. I am not sure I can remember of any other form of incentives to people who are doing business here in Abia State, whether in Aba, whether here in Umuahia, or in other remote parts of the state. Is that enough? And what else, apart from the disbursement of funds? Are there other manner you think that the government can actually help improve business here in Abia State?
Absolutely. Lower the cost of energy, find a way to do it. I know that the federal government said that fuel subsidy is gone. I know that, and a little bit debatable though. Nothing stops the state government in Abia from looking for ways to subsidize the cost of energy. The cost of energy is killing small businesses. You see, if you don't deal with that, it doesn't matter if you give them 100 million. They might not be able to do much with that, because you need to create. See, what we want to see is eventually an environment that encourages innovation, that strengthens people's ability to produce. And if you don't lower the costs, I mean, energy is massive, right? Roads are good, very important as well. But energy is massive, and which is reason. Okay, let's not go to the airport thing that I had very serious sentiments about. But I think that the government should do something very strongly about energy. Let's not just say, "Oh, look, this has to do with the federal government." Light is very unstable, and the small businesses are bearing the brunt of that. Energy can be subsidized in Abia State in some ways. There are a lot of ways that can happen. But that's something the government needs to think about very seriously.
Well, I'm aware in terms of energy that they recently signed the Abia State electricity bill into law. Whether it has begun implementation and all of that remains to be seen. But
that is my problem.
It looks to me as though the government has that in mind.
That is.
I mean, that's the area people are looking to find out what they can bring to the fore. You talk about geometrics in Aba, and here in Omahia, we are not actually enjoying that level of power. Can we talk about IGR? Now, I had to do some digging to look at the numbers, how they were prior to the assumption of office of the current administration. And I discovered that in 2022, it was 18.65 billion naira that was realized as internally generated revenue. And that took a nosedive the year after, which is in 2023, when it decreased to around 17.99 billion naira. And in 2024, it stood at around 39 billion naira, which is probably around 1.147% increase. What do you make of these numbers? And are you impressed? Whatever.
You see, we shouldn't just be looking at what Abia is generating. We should be looking at what Abia is generating and also considering what other states in Nigeria are generating. I am aware that I believe it was in October or November of 2024, I'm aware that Abia State IGR was third to the last in Nigeria. That's not good enough. So if Abia State is doing, for example, 20 billion, just an example, and the neighboring Imo State is doing 30 billion, and Ebonyi is doing perhaps 40 billion, and Rivers is doing perhaps 60 billion, right? And you know, that's so. Even if Abia was doing 20 billion in 2022 and Abia is now doing 40 billion now, right? If other states are doing 50 something billion, 60 something billion, then that's not good. So we shouldn't just be looking at what the state is generating. We should be looking at what the state has the capacity to generate if the necessary things are put in place. The increase you've talked about isn't very impressive. And I'm not trying to look, when I say these things, it is not to undermine the efforts of the government, of the governor and his government. It is just to help the government see that Abia people are asking for more. We are grateful for what is happening, and we have a lot of faith and confidence in his ability to do more. So I think that Abia can actually do much more in terms of IGR. More can be done. We need to look at why we are not generating as much as we should. And if we improve the environment, people can produce more. There can be more economic activities going on, and there will necessarily be more IGR, if that is done.
We'll come back to this discussion in terms of the IGR, because we look at what they are projecting for the year 2025 and then look at how feasible that can be, and probably nuggets for the government to leverage if at all they wish to get to that point. But I want us to look at investment. For everything we have discussed, can we then say that the state has accrued so much investment in the last 1 year plus in terms of the administration of Dr. Alex Otti? Can we say that it has experienced investment across the board more than it has had in terms of the previous administration?
Well, you see, just for the fact that Abia is now ranking third. I mean, I think between July 2023 and June 2024, something like that, in terms of foreign investment coming in, shows you that people have confidence in the government. Capital goes to where it feels safe, all right? So if such is coming in, is an indication. But the question is not whether something has started happening. It is whether that is sustainable. Now, the only way it becomes sustainable is when we start seeing that the capital comes in, stays, and starts multiplying. That becomes a reason why more continues to flow in. See, so we're going to have to look at, yes, a lot has come in. There is, for example, in federal allocation, the state government gets more funds now than before. So we naturally should expect the government to do more than the previous administration. It's a natural common sense thing, right? And as we also see that foreign investment is increasing, again, we should expect that in a short period of time, there will be clear evidences that these funds that are coming in are addressing some of the critical issues we have in terms of infrastructure, in terms of energy, in terms of other things we need to actually do business and live as a people in Abia State.
Let's talk security. I mean, if we are talking about the economy of Abia State, where it is at this point, where it could be by tomorrow, where it can be by probably 2027 before the transition of a new government, we should talk about security because yes, under the current watch of the governor, Dr. Alex Otti, we know what happened at Lok Banta, and we can equally reference the strides of Operation Crush, which is a joint agency in terms of security working around the clock. Can we say we have seen enough? And how do they translate to businesses coming in, to investment as well coming in?
Do you feel safe as a person in the state? Let me ask you. So now that's a question that people have to ask themselves. If you drive out of the city around, I believe 7 p.m., you see laws of security operatives all over the place, which can both create a sense of security and a sense of fear if care is not taken. So I think that what has happened, those activities in Lopa, what Operation Crush has done, shouldn't be a normal approach to security, right? I believe we can put on a much better security framework that doesn't have to look like we are in a war situation, really. There are better ways of doing that, but I recognize that the interventions were necessary at the time to bring down tension, right? But we know that people still don't feel generally safe. There are still, I mean, let's even put it in context. Just a couple of days ago, someone, I heard a story of a young lady who boarded a tricycle, just here at Aba Road. And at the time she said, one of the passengers said, he wasn't going again. And then the driver slow down so that she can step down for this person to alight, and they drove off. By the time she checked, she realized she's been robbed. She's lost her phone. This was in the afternoon in a busy street of Omai. So there are cases of insecurity around the world. There are such things in London. You find it everywhere. However, I'm saying that we appreciate what the governor has done, governor and his government, what they've done in terms of those interventions. But we now want to see a structured approach, a framework that is sustainable. We want to see cameras on the streets, right? We want to see streets being monitored as is done in other places, right? We want to see a more effective intervention, right? Those are the kind of things we want to see in Abia. Abia State can truly be number one. So that's what I will have to say about security. There is more, and I think it can be done in a much better way.
It is still the platform, the pinnacle of all discussions and the flow of God's own state, and we are halfway through our discussion, appraising what the current administration of Dr. Alex Otti has done in terms of policies geared towards repositioning the economy of the state, probably putting it at par with the best in the nation. But we're due for a break now. When we return, key questions to come through, and they can be part of the conversation as well when you call 0808-1826-949 or 0811-605-2949, or you go to facebook.com/flow949fm. We'll continue the conversation upon return. Thank you for leaving your dial on the flow of God's own state. It is still the platform, the pinnacle of all discussions. And we are still looking at the policies of the current administration of Dr. Alex Otti, especially towards the economy. And my guest in the studio is Dr. Ruben Brand, Executive Chairman of the 16th Council, a think tank based in the UK. I'm coming back to you, Doc. Let's talk about the 2025 budget. I know some would say it's out of place to discuss that at this particular point. 750 billion naira budget for the year 2025. Some call that ambition. Others thought it was actually inappropriate. But basically, Abians and those on the street are just seeing how these numbers can translate to better living, better standard of living, and all of that. How do you describe this one, and to what end do you think it can lead the state?
No, if it's not too big, it's fine, right? At 750 billion, that makes sense, especially as 82% of that is supposed to focus on capital expenditure, and you have education receiving a good chunk of that budget. I think about 20%. It's very good. My only concern is when you look at something like education, it has to go beyond painting blocks and renovating schools. If you take pupils of students to Harvard University and teach them with an outdated curriculum, it will translate to nothing. So I think it has to be holistic. The intervention on education in particularly warms my heart, right? Because that's one of the major issues we have, where people go to school and unfortunately they graduate with skills that they can actually use to take care of, to do business, right? And the advice we give to students, like the one I think the governor gave through his one of his commissioners at I believe it's American something university around Alba area, where the students were encouraged to not only take their books seriously, but to also acquire skills that can help them, earn a living. That seems to be a problem to me. I thought they should be able to get these skills in the schools, right? So I should think that something like education itself, for example, requires, again, another area of, there needs to be some state of emergency declared there. We need to be certain that the teachers are well taken care of. They earn well enough to be motivated to actually teach. And that what the students are learning, they not only have modern facilities to learn, but they're also learning the right things, right? So, but in terms of the budget, I think that's good enough. And I think that the idea to channel 80% to capital expenditure, again, is very good. My concern is that this be managed in such a way that it will eventually translate to competitiveness for the states. That's what really matters to me, right? But in terms of how the size of the budget, that makes sense. Education, I think, receives about 148 billion. Let this fund be used to really intervene on the critical issues we have in that sector. And we also need transparency and accountability. There needs to be transparent process. People should be able to assess information about how the whole thing is working, so we can track what the government is doing. That's how you restore trust between the people and their government. And that's how you also see when that is happening, people will naturally want to become more committed in terms of paying their tax and duties and all of that. IGR increases and all of that. So it's important. I also I don't know if there is anything around that was channeled to things like research and development, which is important really, because that's how innovation happens, right? So those are areas that perhaps the government wants to give attention to as well. But in terms of the size of the budget, no, you need budget that big, actually.
Let's now talk about the IGR, and I told you we will come back to this discussion where you have actually put them side by side with other states in Nigeria, not just being concerned about how it has improved on its own from what it used to produce to generate to what it is now currently generating. And the ambition of the current administration is 120 billion naira for the year 2025. And I want to get your thoughts on that as well. And it's not just about having the ambition, because everyone can dream, but it's about the modalities put on ground to achieve that is where there are questions begging for answers. And I assume that they have their own modalities and avenues to achieve this particular thing. But what areas do you think they should look at before this 120 billion naira can actually be achieved? And that would be massive for the state, wouldn't it?
120 billion, that represents a 207% increase from 2024 this year. That's very massive, that's very ambitious. And I know that they are targeting a tax revenue of 33 billion, something thereabout. And then I know that they're looking at non-tax revenue of about 67 point something billion as well to be able to achieve that. And I know that part of the plans include expanding the tax net. And it's important to get more people to pay tax. So that makes sense to me. But people are more likely to pay tax when they see a government whose policies and activities bears a positive impact on their daily lives. You know, sometimes when we roll out figures, when we say, for example, this number of persons are living in poverty, it can just mean figures to you. Yeah. But it's actually talking about real human beings, a mom, a dad, children who may be going to school without food in their stomach, right? So those are real issues. And if life is so hard for me in Abia State, if I'm struggling to run my small business, then I want to evade tax. I'm going to do everything I can to evade it. You see, so you may have to pursue me to catch me to pay the tax. But if the system is working, now there will be a reason for people to. So that's the reason why I'm saying the government needs to do more. And of course, I know that they also want to leverage technology, implementing digital solutions to streamline revenue. That's good, and reduce leakages. That's very good. It should be done. But most especially is diversifying tax revenue sources. You see, you have to explore, you know, avenues. And I know the government talks about fees, charges, fines, but you need to look beyond that. The government can facilitate platforms that enable productivity and charge people for being on those platforms. Do you understand? So, and a lot of other ideas that they can explore. But they should. It's good if that can happen, but it requires a lot of strategic efforts, not just efforts, strategic efforts, and they need to be able to engage with the stakeholders. But again, even engaging with stakeholders will not be that effective if the people cannot feel the impact of the government, you know, in their daily lives. A time will come, listen, a time will come when the people will begin to take the roads you are renovating or building for granted. So that ceases to be a motivation. When the roads are very bad and the government comes and start building it, people will celebrate it. But soon enough, people will realize that roads are actually supposed to be built. You know, there are things we just celebrate. I mean, there are things that look so great here, and it's because of how bad things have actually been. But time comes when people begin to realize these roads are supposed to be done. So it stops to be a motivation for anything. And people now look at, okay, how am I spending in gas, in energy every day to run this small tailoring shop that I'm running? Look at how much I'm spending, you see. So if you want to do that, and it's also important that, you know, the government encourages SMEs so much that they are more productive. You see, all the banks you see, you know, all the companies that are branched in Abia State, you see, if you see them growing, that does not translate to increase in taxation, for example, for the state, because they are branches of companies somewhere else. You understand that? Yeah. And they're going to pay those taxes where they are headquartered. So we need to see companies being built out of Abia State that has the capacity to pay sufficient in taxes and revenue and whatever fees they have to pay, you know, so that those kind of
which is the point you raised about agriculture, because
exactly.
Most of us feel that it's been underdeveloped in terms of being a quota for different raw materials. Talk about cassava, talk about palm oil, cocoa, to mention but a few. All of those raw materials you can find in Abia State, but you can't actually see any company that is working on all of them.
You know, it's quite interesting. Let me just mention, quite recently we were in Ghana, and we're having this conversation with the government. And someone did mention that, he said, Dr. Rubin, Ghana is a major producer of gold, right? You find, in fact, it was called Gold Coast in the past, and cocoa. But you can't find one billionaire who became a billionaire out of cocoa business or gold business in Ghana. But if you go to America and Europe, you find people who, within the value chain of cocoa or gold, have turned to millionaires and billionaires. Why? Because we don't just develop these things sufficiently, right? We're still using crude tools to farm. We have farm settlements that are producing nothing. We don't have agro-industrial processing zones, really. And I know that in the 2025 budget, about 13 billion was earmarked for establishing agro-processing zone. That's good, right? And but these are things that need to happen. And I'm also aware that there is some Vietnam partnership coming in. But what I'm just saying is that that's why you need to strengthen those areas. We need to have cluster development around agriculture. We need to see how they're producing starch and other things around agriculture and processing food and exporting them. That's what should be happening. When that starts happening, this IGR target becomes a child's play. It's good that the government is setting that kind of, but whether it translates to reality or not is the real thing. And for that to happen, there has to be a serious, committed, not politics, not optics, not press statements, not media releases, no, not cutting of ribbons, strategic, action every day that will help the government, realize this very impressive objective.
All right, it's time to open the phone lines. I would leave one more question for the last. Okay, 0808-1826-949 or 0811-605-2949. When you get through to us, tell us your name and where you are calling us from. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Wisdom.
You're welcome. Name and location, please.
Yeah, this is Mr. S. Mikalo. That was from Abion Hoffia, the home hospitality #1 community in Abia State.
Go ahead, please.
Community. Our guest, good morning.
A very good morning to you.
Yeah, well done, sir. I'm so happy the way you have been analyzing the programs and policies of this present administration. Of a truth, is very, very apparent. What our governor is doing, his performance, everybody has been commending him. All well-meaning Abians have been commending him, irrespective of their party they belong to. They have been commending him. His policies, his program, so far, is second to none. In all sectors, he has been doing well. Infrastructure, he has been doing well. Even his efforts in the area of electricity to ensure that we have a regular power supply, which have been longing for. And then once he achieves that one, you see, economically, it's going to, it will affect Abians, mostly artisans, positively. I want to equally commend him in the area of this security. Security is very, very important. And the new headline this morning is inviting investors to come and invest in Abia. That Abia has improved in security.
Wrap up your thoughts now, Eni. Thank you.
So what I'm saying in the first is our governor trying, and all we need to do is to support him, even for second tenure.
Thank you very much. 0808-1826-949 or 0811-605-2949. I mean, we are still in 2025 and it's an awful 2 years to go before talking about 2027, and we'll have to be very realistic with ourselves and not being sycophants. I'm just airing my own thoughts there. 0808-126-949 or 0811-605-2949. Get involved in the conversation. Let's feel your pulse this morning, looking at the economical state of this Abia State, basically. And there are a few comments on Facebook. Let's see if we can give them a looking in. This one is coming from Sunday Okobo, and he said Dr. Alex Otti'S performance is okay. I'm just trying to understand what he's saying, but I think he's commending the governor. Basically, is one per none. I don't know what that means. 0808-126-949 or 6052949. We are due for a short break. When we return after the break, we will open the phone lines and get to fill your pause. Stay with us. Phone lines are open: 080818269949 or 0811-605-2949. And while I keep my eyes on the phone lines to identify when a call comes through, I will turn back to Dr. Ruben now. And you talked about competitiveness, and I'm left wondering, when you mention competitiveness time and again in how the state should be performing alongside other states in Nigeria, I feel there is still some understanding that we should have in that particular part, or don't you think so?
Okay. All right. So competitiveness is the efficiency with which a state is able to deploy its resources, whatever those resources are, whether human resources or some natural resources, to productive use, right? Which of course translates to better standard of living, for the people living in that state. That's what competitiveness is. So we're looking at not just what the state has and what the state is doing. We're thinking about what the state can do, should be able to do with these resources. That's what competitiveness is about.
All right, let's look at this particular message. This one is saying Abia government should seek federal government assistance to fight insecurity in Abia State because Abia cannot develop under insecurity. This is coming from Chika Norom, writing us from Umokabia, Abia State, asking the federal government to come in and help Abia State fight insecurity. Okay, that is your own thought. I think we should be packing our baggage at this point in time. I'm going to turn to Dr. Ruben once again before we leave the studio. Let's get your final shot. For the Upton time, we keep mentioning numbers, billions, trillions, and people on the streets will continue to get bamboozled by the numbers and the figures we reel out time and again, and they keep questioning the point when they get to feel all of this. How important is it then that the current administration here in Abia State do all within their powers and the possibilities obtainable to ensure that Abians will begin to feel the impact of the money they mention almost every day? That's the real situation. That's the real issue here. And that's why you see me talking about competitiveness. Because you see, when a state is competitive, what happens is businesses do better, right? Productivity increases. More money is in circulation, right? It affects the life of the person on it. Now, think about something. When President Tinubu was inaugurated and he made that statement, he said, subsidy is gone. That same day, the pump price of fuel in Nigeria increased. Nothing else happened. So that's just a statement coming from the head of state. So that's the power of policies. You see? So when policies are done right, they can be very transformative, right? Which is why we're emphasizing that this whole thing has to be about how it gives people the opportunity to do better, right? If you do policy well, you will see the cost of living come down. You will see people earn more. You will see more businesses open up so these are the real indicators. How many new businesses are opening up in Abia State right now? How many can we expect to see opening up over the next 1 year? Those are real indicators, all right? So what was the task like last year? What is it? So that gives us an idea of how things are improving, really. How much of export are we doing, if we're doing at all? How much do we start doing? But I understand that there has to be a foundation put in place for that to happen. And I think the government is making their best effort to do that. I'm only saying that more needs to be done. There needs to be transparency, and there needs to be kind of a state of emergency, declared on those things, so that we are working like people who are on a burning platform. All right, we don't have a lot of time to make the lives of our people better. It needs to happen right now. Okay, so we need to do that immediately. Let me sincerely appreciate you, Dr. Ruben Brian, who is the executive chairman Okay, you want to add something?
Yeah, so I thought that beyond what I've said, here are a few thoughts I would like to offer to the government.
Go ahead.
So first of all, the Global Advisory Board, you either activate it or you disband it, right? If it's working, let it work. It's not enough to appoint global names for headlines. Governance must be beyond PR. And secondly, there has to be transparency about external funding, all right? Let us know where the funding is coming in and what you're doing with it, right? And we should be able to hold you by your words. And I want to say restructure agricultural programs for results. We need results. Sending people abroad to study mechanized farming sounds good, but we need to do more than that. This thing needs to translate to food being available in Abia State. When we start seeing the food over the next, we need to have some timeline, right? And then launch a real jobs dashboard. The governor says he's creating jobs. Good. Let's build a live dashboard that shows exactly where those jobs are and how many and in which sectors. Transparency builds trust, and trust is a currency of governance, a real currency in governance. And I will also say centralized economic planning, all right, decentralized it rather. There's too much concentration of power and planning in Omwa here, Abano. Let's do a little more than that. And create a citizen scorecard portal, right? We should be able to democratize performance tracking. Let every ministry be scored by the public. And the public, I speak to you. For God's sake, this is about your life, your welfare, your children, and their future. When a government is doing well, praise them, support them, applaud them. By all means, if they are not doing well in any area, talk about it. That's how they go. Because sometimes a governor could become shielded and distracted from reality, except if he's getting the right information. So sometimes we are also the reason why government don't do as much as they should have done, because we sometimes overpraise because we want to make sure that the governor likes us. The governor doesn't even need that. A government needs critical constructive criticisms to help it do much better. Every leader will appreciate that. So let's realize that. Let's make sure that we are supporting our government. And I wish Governor Otti'S and his administration the best as they continue to do what we elected them to do.
Okay, let me sincerely appreciate you, Dr. Ruben Brian, the Executive Chairman of the 16th Council, a think tank based in the UK. Thank you for coming on the platform this morning, and of course for dissecting the issue of the economy and how this can be better for Abians in general. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Let me equally appreciate you that attempted to be part of the conversation, and those who equally shared their thoughts via our feedback platform. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Stanko behind the visuals on Facebook. And to my producer, Samson Eze, thank you for your contribution. I am Wisdom Thomas, and I'm signing out. And I want to say that accountability about the current administration will go a long way to reduce the trust deficit, which is inherent across the length and breadth of the state. Have an amazing weekend ahead, and bye-bye.